Hey everybody, it's time for another Grant Draws. Tonight we are talking to Jason Lennox. How are you doing tonight, Jason?
I'm doing good, man. Grant, I appreciate you having me on your show.
Yeah, no
I'm doing
problem.
well.
I was looking at your Kickstarter and it seems like I don't know how much more help you need. I mean, it looks like it's going really, really well.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been good. I will say this: it seems to be a tougher Kickstarter environment than a couple years ago when I had my last Kickstarter on. But I'm doing well. But you can never get too much support and too much help because there's always more people, right?
Right. So let's get a few things out of the way before we get too much into the meat and potatoes
Yep,
of the conversation. Uh, as always, Grant Draws is sponsored by the Independent Creator Directory. Do you know what that is, Jason?
I don't.
So what it is it's basically kind of trying to be the Internet Movie Database, but for independent creators.
Interesting.
Yeah, a friend of ours named Joe Bachman is setting it up, and it's pretty cool. He updates it for you. You don't have to update it. You just send him like a quick message on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and you say, "Hey, I have a new comic book coming out. Can you add that to my page?" And then
Hmm,
he does it for you. It's pretty cool.
interesting. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. And this goes for everybody in the chat too. If you guys are interested in doing the independent creator directory, just send Joe Bachman a message. He's on Facebook. He's on Instagram. I don't know if he's on Twitter or not, but
Hmm.
you can find him on the social media. All right, I'm gonna run through some of these comments, and then I'll do a little self promotion, and then we'll talk about your Kickstarter. Okay?
You got it.
Foxy's saying good evening. Donna is as well, and then Foxy said, "Oh, Donna said long time no see." Yeah, they so everybody in the chat for the most part watches another show before my show starts, so they pretty much have already see each other.
It sounds
Trey
like
is
a
saying,
pretty tight audience. I like it.
yeah. So I always compare it to remember back in the '90s when there was like the TV shows that were on after Seinfeld. They would
Yep.
get like a ratings boost because they were on after Seinfeld.
Hmm.
I'm kind of like that.
It's a good spot to
Deanna's
be in.
saying, yeah, Deanna's saying good evening. Foxy is saying that she will probably be quiet because her hip is giving her issues and the meds aren't taking away the pain. I'm sorry to hear that. My wife is in a good deal of pain tonight too. She's been having really severe headaches and the doctors can't explain why. So it's bad news.
Ugh, it's the worst.
Well, I mean, it's funny. Like every time they rule something out, people say, "Oh, that's so good," and it's like, well, yeah. I mean, it's good that she doesn't have this disease, but on the other hand, it's not good that we don't know what's wrong with her. You know what I mean?
I had some really bad migraine headaches years ago, and I was able to get some medication that helped out. And then, knock on wood, I haven't gotten any in years. Um, it was always vague because there was never any trigger, and I never was really that excited about it because uh, there was never any identifiable cause, and then they just went away. So what was it about? I have no idea. But when those things were rocking, they hurt.
So that's what we're hoping is going to happen. Um, so far, the doctors can't come up with any cause, but they prescribed her a bunch of drugs, and hopefully, that's going to kick this thing's butt.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. So as I was talking about earlier, the independent creator directory is on here. He said, "Good evening, everybody. Just popping by for a moment to drop my like. Still chatting with tech support. I don't. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if he mentioned that on the last show why he's on tech support. But, I watched the last show, but I must have not been paying attention when he talked about that. And Foxy's wishing him luck. Dawn is saying hello. Donna is saying, "I feel for your Foxy. I had to change to my sciatica chair. Still had to add a cushion." Oh
Hmm.
boy,
Ugh.
I'm sorry to hear that, Donna. Carl is saying hello. Donna is saying hello. Foxy is saying it's not pleasant. It popped, then severe pain. It's not going anywhere without my stick tonight. But other than that, Carl Witzman is saying Foxy. I wonder if he's saying it like in that kind of voice. Fox. It's in parentheses. I don't know. Foxy saying thanks, and Donna saying don't forget to like and share. Very, very true. So one thing I wanted to mention is that uh, my Kickstarter is now in pre-launch, and I'm going to do the world debut of the variant cover here on the show. And hopefully this works. Do you see it?
League of Cryptids.
Yeah.
Speaking of cryptids, I had one just show up here. It's a small child. He decided to show up.
Yeah. So so this is issue 2 of League of Cryptids. It's on Kickstarter. Well, it's not on Kickstarter. The pre-launch page is on. For those of you who don't know what League of Cryptids is about, it's the idea: what if what we know of as cryptids are actually ancient aliens who were put here to kind of protect and help humans develop? So it's Sasquatch. You can see Sasquatch and Mothman here, and they're fighting the Loveland Frogmen. I don't know how much you know about cryptids, but also in the team is the Loch Ness Monster, Chupacabra, and the Jersey Devil.
So is that League of Cryptids? Frogs Go to Love? No, I'm not. I'm trying to find it so I can look at the pre-launch follow, but I think I'm on the wrong League of Cryptids.
Yeah, I put the link down in the chat. You might be looking at issue number 1.
It might be. You know, let's see. Show chat. All right.
I can put it in the private chat for you as well.
Yeah, put it in the private chat. Put it in the private chat, please. Yes. Oh, there it is. I'm showing my inexperience being a StreamYard expert. Yes, let me go to the correct League of Cryptids.
Yeah, so as I always say with my little spiel, whether or not you plan on spending money on the League of Cryptids or not, it helps me just for you to click the little notify me on launch card. And you know what? My friend Marvin is here as well. And that reminds me that he has a Kickstarter as well. So I'm not as worried about my friend Marvin's.
Hi, Marvin.
As I what? Do you know Marvin?
Do you know? I'm pretty sure I know Marvin. Come on.
Oh, I don't know. Were you guys old friends or something?
I think I know more than most of the quality people in the independent comic circles. So hello, Marvin. Good to see you.
Cool. Well, I didn't know you before now, but now you can count me as one of the quality people, or hopefully quality people.
I appreciate it, and I do like the cryptids thing. That's an interesting take on them. I like it.
Thank you. And I shared Marvin's comic book. His Kickstarter is done, I believe, about a week. 6 days. And it's only about $250 away from getting funded. So there for a little while I was a little bit nervous about Marvin's Kickstarter, but it looks like it's gonna get funded, and it's gonna kick ass. For those of you who don't know about Marvin's comic book, it is basically it's about a drug that gives you superpowers at the cost of your life and or sanity.
So I just got to see the trailer for Marvin's comic the other day, and it's very intimidating because it's like a Hollywood movie. It's very intense.
Yeah, everybody keeps telling him he needs to make like a full length like episode of that,
Yes,
but it would take so much time. I mean, just that trailer took so much time.
no doubt.
So, yeah, so yeah, that would be awesome, but very difficult to do.
Well, we
Um,
can dream, and we hope that he gets funded.
I mean, I think it is at this point.
Is
I
it?
mean,
I thought it was. I thought it was slightly short.
he's about $250 away, but he's got 6 more days, so
Yeah, he'll get
really,
that, no doubt.
he can definitely do that. So the next Kickstarter we're going to talk about is the Lords of the Cosmos, issue
All right,
number 5.
I like
Like
it.
I said, you have no worries about getting funded. You're sitting pretty at 6,000 with 125 backers, and you still got 19 days to go. So you could still probably, I mean, you could probably still make another 1,000
Or more. You never know.
or more.
My thought is always, get what you can. I think the way the algorithm works, I think it'll be a big rush at the end. But obviously, the big challenge for any of these projects is to keep the momentum going up and to keep finding new readers, right? And we all love as creators our long-term fans, but then you don't want to sit in your laurels. You want to find a new audience and different people and get people that you haven't met excited. That's always the big goal as a creative, to find those new people, right? And it's a challenge. It's not easy.
Okay, so it says Lords of the Cosmos, issue 5, epic 80s inspired comic book.
Yes.
And below that it says guns, magic, machines, mayhem, mystical technology, and cybernetic chaos erupt in a fantasy apocalypse wasteland. Wow, so you're combining all the genres.
Yes. So it's very much in tune with my 1980s cartoons. So uh really kind of the spiritual DNA for Lords of the Cosmos would be in things you might have some fond memories of, like Flash Gordon, Black Star, Masters of the Universe, Thundercats, and Thundar the Barbarian, right? Where there was magic technology, just kind of really over the top. Um, let's turn everything up to an 11 and let's really have some fun with our comics, right?
Yeah. Was
So there's
Riders an inspiration?
Dino Rider is definitely an inspiration for the character Jungle Princess that lives in a kingdom where there's dinosaurs, and then there's a gigantic turtle that's unrelated to her that has battleship cannons on it, right? So there's separate
Yeah.
strange beings that are members of the Lords of the Cosmos.
Yeah, Dino Riders was a weird cartoon. It was a good one, but it was a weird one, right?
Oh, I agree. There was so much variety. The Inhumanoids, the Transformers, Visionaries, right? Robotics. All those things are in my collective DNA. Silverhawks, right?
Yeah.
Jace and the Wheeled Warriors. I mean, we'll see how deep we can take this conversation. But a lot of this stuff, they were all things that really tripped my trigger as a kid. And I think they still do as an adult. I have a lot of fondness for that kind of culture and media. And I think it's kind of gone away. It's not really what kids are into today, but that's okay. They don't need to be. Um, so this comic kind of reflects those sensibilities that I had as a kid, and I still care about that stuff today. Like, if I still love sharing with some of my friends toy advertisements from the 80s and clips and trailers from obscure 80s cartoons.
Yeah, so have you tried going back and watching some of those old cartoons like as an adult? And
Mm.
it can be an interesting experience, not necessarily a bad experience, just interesting, right?
So I have, and I've rewatched a lot over the years, and it is interesting because I was kind of an animation snob as a kid. So, for example, Dungeons and Dragons, the cartoon, right? Um, the episodes had a pretty standard animation quality, but there was one episode, and I forget the exact title of it, that I always liked more than the others. And I found out later, and I realized it rewatching it, because they had one episode that was subcontracted out to a pretty high-end Korean animation studio in the 80s. So that there was one episode that was like light years above the rest. And I
Mm.
picked up on it. Some shows, if you rewatch them, the quality isn't really there so much. One cartoon that really didn't quite stand up to my original opinion was the original Star Blazers. My wife had gotten me the box set for that, and I thought it was not as good as I remembered. But I still loved it a lot because I loved that show when I was a little kid. So yeah, it is interesting. I recently got the collected Mighty Orbots, which was a one season Saturday morning cartoon that was on ABC that Tonka and the GoBots got rid of with litigation because they felt it was too similar to the GoBots, even though the shows had literally nothing to do with one another. And I've rewatched that recently, and it held up really well, and I remember loving it as a kid. So it is interesting because some of them were just complete toy cash grabs, and I'm still okay with it. Some of them are a little rough to watch, like the original Filmation Masters of the Universe. We have a lot of fun feelings for them as fans, but
Yeah.
a lot of those were just cheap, and they did a lot of shortcuts to save money. So there's kind of a limited rewatch appeal to that series, even though I have a lot of fond memories of it. It's kind of cheap, and that was Filmation's thing to try to do stuff as inexpensively as possible. So they're a little rougher to watch, but I really enjoy the 2002 He-Man cartoon a lot better. I always felt that was like the peak of He-Man as an animated show.
I didn't catch that one.
It was really good. I was kind of indifferent towards the new Netflix He-Man show with
I
him,
like
like
that a
Kevin
lot.
Smith. I thought it was okay, but I thought the 2002 version was like heads and tails above all of it. It was really good, and it had great writing, and it had really good animation, and it had a really good story, and then it ended on a cliffhanger, and then it got canceled. So, to me, that was like the peak of Masters of the Universe cartoons. So I don't know. I mean, I love being, I love talking about it.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. A lot of those old Saturday morning cartoons, even if they're not good, they still give you kind of like those warm, fuzzy feelings. Thinking back on them.
Yeah. Well, like so, for example, Flash Gordon was a mini series on NBC where they tried to do Flash Gordon in the late 70s as a cartoon, and it was called Flash Gordon: The Greatest Adventure Ever Told, and it was like Flash Gordon escaping Poland, being bombed by the Nazis, and he ends up on Mongo. And it was like there was some rotoscoping and some really basic proto CGI animation in it, and it
So,
was really really good.
so from the way you're saying it,
Mhm.
or actually, I don't. So, are you saying rotoscoping as a good thing or a bad thing?
So I have mixed thoughts on rotoscoping, but I felt that for the original Flash Gordon cartoon, it worked. It was
Okay.
okay. Um, I thought rotoscoping was cool in Heavy Metal the movie, but I felt like in, for example, the Lord of the Rings cartoon by Ralph
I
Bakshi, kind of.
I knew when we started talking about rotoscope, like bad examples of rotoscoping, you were going to bring
Yeah,
up Lord of the Rings.
right. But we'll use that as a bad example. But I felt that Flash Gordon, the cartoon, and Heavy Metal, the movie, it worked. Like for those, it worked for me. But I'm not a real big fan of it. Um, but I love Flash Gordon. But NBC tried to stretch it out over 2 seasons, and by the end, it was really low quality, reusing prior shots. They had the comedy little 80s animal for kids, and I didn't really care for it even as a kid. But if you watch what they produced for television for a movie, it was great. Ming the Merciless was over the top. Aura, his daughter, was riding around on like a dinosaur bird, and she was, very sexy, even, especially for a Saturday morning cartoon. And I have fond memories of that. Did it stand up over 2 seasons? No. But the first kind of original dose of animation was outstanding. I'll have to send you the link. I think you can watch the movie on YouTube.
So I don't remember the Flash Gordon cartoon. What I do remember is I remember not long after that they made a cartoon that was not just Flash Gordon, but it was also, I think it was
The
also
Phantom.
the Phantom, and then there was some
Yeah.
magician.
Yeah, Mandrake the Magician, the Phantom, Flash Gordon, and I forget the fourth character. So I remember being excited when that came out, and I thought the animation was terrible, and I never wanted to watch it. So I'm aware of it, but the Flash Gordon I'm talking about was from like the late 70s, and it was a Saturday morning cartoon in the early 80s, and like that definitely looked like the old comic strip, and it was pretty well done. And again, for a Saturday morning cartoon, it was pretty deep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the show you're talking about, it kind of blows it away. And I remember being literally disappointed with the show you're
Oh,
talking.
I'm not saying
Defenders of the Earth. That's what it was called. It was Defenders of the Earth, and that was the theme song, right?
Yeah, I'm certainly not advocating the other series. I was just mentioning that.
Yeah.
We're kind of getting off topic though a little bit. Let's finish up promoting your Kickstarter, and then we can kind of get back to talking.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about
it, or whatever else you want to talk about.
So, go ahead. You ask the questions, Grant. Hit me up, and I'll talk about it.
So, do you want to talk at all about the artist who is on this series? Like, how did you meet them?
Well, one is me, right? And it's so I did. So my art, if you scroll up, there's 3 of us that did the bulk of the art because there's 3 stories in this book. So all the things you're looking at now are all my original pages for the book. So that's Jason's. That's me, right? I'm Jason.
Cool.
So those are all my original pages. And then I had 7 variant covers. So I did the main cover for the book, which is that one right there in red. But was it past it? So that's my cover I did for the book, like the main cover. Yeah, that's Zemba. She's one of the villains. Like the book has kind of a shifting narrative. There's seemingly a different main character in each issue. So those pages you're scrolling past there now, those are done by Sasha Chiardo. So that's from a story that I co-wrote with my buddy Dave Kahn. And I'm sorry, Dave Kahn. Yeah.
This kind of has a little bit of a Mobius vibe to it, a little bit.
Yeah, so that is by Luigi Baricelli. He's also an Italian artist. And then Brendan Hikes, who's an author from Pittsburgh. He and I co-wrote this story. So, yeah, Luigi definitely has those heavy metal Mobius vibes.
Oh, you're working with a Pittsburgh artist. Interesting.
Writer. Brendan's a writer. So he and I co-wrote that story, but the artist was from Pittsburgh. So that's one of my sequential pages. And that's one of my sequential pages. And that's one of my sequential pages. So those are pages that I did for the main story.
You know what? Now that I think about it, you're from Pennsylvania, right?
I am, yeah. I live in State College, so we're about 2.5 hours away from you in Pittsburgh.
And I didn't meet you at. We've done Happy Valley before.
Yeah, I was there. I've been to both of those, so I was there with you.
Huh. I don't know. Maybe we met. Maybe we didn't meet. Do you remember seeing Marvin there?
To be honest, I don't. Which isn't to say I didn't talk to him, but for the most part, I just kind of stayed around my table and didn't really wander around the show a whole lot.
Yeah, so we were probably in the same convention, but for whatever reason, we didn't end up meeting. And you know what? I just realized that I forgot to put the link for this in the chat. So,
oh my goodness, chat people, please click the link.
Yeah, forgetting to post the link is the cardinal sin, right?
Yeah. So one thing I've noticed from kind of being out and talking is a lot of the people that are making comics seem to be just writers. There's not a lot of artists out there. So I do writing and art now. So I'm like a dual threat.
Cool. Yeah, I do a little bit of both. I've I've written comic books that other people have drawn. I've drawn comic books that other people wrote, uh, vice versa, and then I've written stuff that I drew. So yeah, it's nice if you can do it all. Um, I don't know if I can do it all well, but at least I try.
Sure. No, so I was really pleased with my art for the book. Sasha and Luigi are super talented sequential artists, so I definitely had to make sure I stepped my game up because if I'm going to put my stuff, right next to their stuff, they're pros. So I definitely felt that I was in the same neighborhood, but I was really impressed with the work they did. So you gotta surround yourself with talented people to make your own game better, right?
Yeah, exactly. Um, so okay, so you mentioned that you were a big animation fan.
Yep.
Um, um, was there a reason why you chose to go into making comic books rather than doing animation?
um well, I think really that's more of a practical question because like let's say, hey, I wish this was an animated series. The amount of people and money to do that is so much higher that it's almost not even a choice. Like honestly, I think Lords of the Cosmos would set up great as an animated anthology series, but the cost to bring that to the world would be, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe like $1 million. I have no idea, but I couldn't afford it. I couldn't fundraise it, so it's almost not even a choice. Even though I think it would be cooler. Like I think that would be awesome to see it as little animated shorts, right? Um,
Right.
I love anthologies, and there's not a whole lot of animated anthologies out there. Off the top of my head, Katsushiro Otomo's Memories, which has 3 stories in it. Neo Tokyo has 3 stories in it, and then there's the Animatrix from like '02 that has like 7 or 8 Matrix-based shorts. And I love stuff like that. Um, Lords of the Cosmos, I think, would set up great with a lot of little, short form animation, but it's so far beyond my ability to bring to life. I would love it, but I don't really have the ability to practically do it. So a comic book becomes a lower bar to clear. I can make a comic book, I can do art and write for it and fundraise enough to put it out to the world. So it's kind of a not to disparage comics because I still enjoy comics as a medium and I think they're really cool, but I don't know that there's even a fair choice to say, well, would you have done this or that? Because I don't think
Yeah.
the one's really realistic. Now, does someone see it and say, oh my goodness, we need to make that into a series? Maybe. Um, but that hasn't happened yet. Maybe it will.
Have you done like short little animations?
So in the trailer for the Kickstarter, which is the top of the campaign, one of my really good friends from my childhood, AJ Nutter, he is a professional video producer. So he did take some of the art for the book and he does some kind of basic motion capture animation where some things move around a little bit and he adds some special effects to some things, which is it's kind of basic, but it's not actually animation per se. It's like a little bit of like, motion comics, which is really cool. But that's about as far as we've gotten with it. Is something like that.
And I'm looking for. Sorry that I'm being quiet. I'm trying to. I closed the link. Here we go. I will bring this back up, and I will present. I forgot to play the trailer. Usually I do, but I forgot this time. Okay, so
Lords of the Cosmos, unite! The critically acclaimed comic book series by Jason Lenox, Dennis Fallon, and Jason Palmetier returns with issue 5. Welcome back to Planet Aiden, a land where banished Greek gods, undead unicorns, cannibal cyborgs, and a vengeful dominatrix all wage war over a world run by a planet-sized machine. Lords of the Cosmos, issue 5. Featuring 3 mind-bending stories on 44 pages in classic black and white. Heroes are summoned and villains betray one another, forming new dark alliances as the main storyline continues in Enemy of My Enemy. Archvillain Zemba's daily routine of decadence, torture, and sadism is turned upside down in A Day in the Life, when domination and introspection collide. During the First Cosmic War, a group of Lords of the Cosmos commandos go deep behind enemy lines to discover the disciples of Umex's latest plan in Pulse Part 1. Inspired by 1980s favorites like Masters of the Universe, 2000 AD, and Heavy Metal Magazine. Lords of the Cosmos 5 features a variety of unique rewards, including variant covers from Koi Fall, L.C. Freitas, Caesar, and Ignacio Ragnarsson. See why Indie Comics Dispatch says Lords of the Cosmos pulls all the nostalgia strings while managing to also create something new and unique. And Behold the Geek says Lords of the Cosmos is an insane sci-fi fantasy comic that takes no prisoners. Back Lords of the Cosmos issue 5, now on Kickstarter.
Yeah, I see what you mean about the animation. It was cool.
Yeah, and like I said, it's there's just a little bit of motion, and like there's some special effects on the drop ship with some flames. No, I'd love to see these characters animated. I think they really, their DNA is in cartoons. That's kind of where a lot of this came from. So they were built to look and feel like those 80s series. The goal was always to have those feelings, but not to be derivative. And I think we've done a good job of giving a good nostalgia lean that you can, if you're of a certain age and you remember that stuff, you'll say, hey, like this is cool. It reminds me of it. But on the other hand, I'm not a fan of throwing out member berries to be like, okay, I recognize this stuff, but like it's got to stand on its own. And I think Lords of the Cosmos is cool if you have those, experiences that you can kind of get an additional level of enjoyment out of it. But I've always felt that the story and the books are good enough that if you're 18 years old and you just read it, that it stands up on its own merits without having to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I get the thing. So I think it works well on either level. But yeah, I think it'd be great as a cartoon. So, if you're listening to the Grants Draws podcast and you are in charge of animation fundage, call your boy, right? It'd be cool. I mean, we make these things because we care about them. I didn't make it to get an animated show.
Right.
If that would somehow happen, that would be awesome. But I don't ever sit and feel that, it's disappointing that it hasn't happened, because that's a huge goal. It would be a huge stretch. I know it would be awesome as animated, so maybe one day. I'm open to it.
Yeah. What about action figures? Have you thought? I mean, for instance, Marvin, who's in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would say probably most creators, that's out of their wheelhouse, but it is a possibility.
So years ago, I met JD Calderon at a little show in Reading, Pennsylvania. I think it was 2013. And he had an action figure, I think, of Oswald, his main character. And I remember I was fascinated that he had such a thing, and it was a legitimately, it was a tool and die, mass produced. It was the real deal. It was a real action figure. I said, that's so cool. And I remember he said to me, well, I kind of let my emotions get ahead of me, and I spent thousands of that, like a lot of money, to literally have a mass production run of his character. And I remember he said, don't do this because I have a whole room in my house filled with these things.
Right.
And I remember thinking like, oh, that sucks, right? And then a couple years later, I met a guy called Eric Adi, who has a little sculpture studio called Mudroom Workshop. I met him at Wizard World Philadelphia in either 2015 or 16. And I said to him, hey, if I ever need anyone to sculpt a toy, like just one, could you do it? And that must have been 2014 when I met him, regardless. And he said, yeah. So when we were doing Lords of the Cosmos issue 1, I had him sculpt the main villain, the leader, Umex. And what we did is we had professional photos taken of the sculpture. And then my friend Jared Brown took the photographs. And then he made a Photoshop of a blister pack on the back of the book that made it look like the toy was in a blister pack with packaging. And then the inside back cover of the book is like the back of a Transformers or G.I. Joe with like character statistics and like a little bio and some other business in the back. So every issue since then, we've always done the back of the book as a toy. Now, I didn't do what JD did and, spend tens of thousands of dollars on a tool and die line. But I just have one made. So in the newest Kickstarter for issue 5, we have Zemba as a toy. She's on the back of the book. And then Eric agreed for this Kickstarter that he would do up to 5 custom sculpts of her character. So I think 2 have been purchased out of the 5. So it's like $300, and he'll build you a custom Zemba Lords of the Cosmos action figure, which is about 11 inches tall. He's basing her off a Barbie model, and he'll build custom clothes and weapons, and he'll build a stand, and then we'll send you like action figure packaging to put behind her. So, there is action figures, but they're more like custom sculptures versus mass produced lines. So yeah, would it be awesome to have Lords of the Cosmos toys? Hell yeah. But again, it starts to become issues of cost, scale, and what's the actual interest out in the world to start, knocking out these toys and sales. We're probably not close to that yet, but it's cool to have Eric and Jared kind of build these things to give you that feel. And if you go into the campaign, you can see it's near the end in the add-on section. You can see the sculpture, and we have some behind the scenes of him building it. And then the photo shoot we did at my friend Dave's house. She had her own little photo shoot in a table, which is sweet. We had lights and a camera on a tripod, so we got her shot up real well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think the creators who have action figures, I think it's probably a little bit more of like a vanity thing. I mean, I don't know. Maybe some people have the what's the word I'm looking for? The audience to support that, but I think most of us probably don't. So go ahead.
And I guess for me, they're not vanity; they're part of the book because we want to have that toy cartoon feel. So even one of our variant covers there's a gentleman named Ignacio Ragnarsson on Facebook that does anime artwork. And so he did Cycorn and Zemba as 90s anime characters. So this issue is kind of fun because we have our first vision of the Lords of the Cosmos as an anime. And then we also have a new toy. So I'm always trying to reinforce that with the book. And it's definitely cheating because we don't have a full anime, but we have one image. And we don't have an actual toy line, but we have one toy. Right. So to me, the toys were never a vanity project. They were, hey, we can sculpt one. Right. And then I can keep it in a shelf and whatever. And then they're part of the book because it's the back cover. And I think the people that have been reading the book, they've gotten used to that. They like the fact there's a toy and like, well, who's going to be the toy in issue 6? Right. So it is fun. And I really have enjoyed seeing the toys come to life. And we've had 5 toys in the back of the book. And then I've had some fans over the years asked to do custom builds. So there's been another probably half dozen Lords of the Cosmos sculptures put out in the world we have photographs of. So it's pretty cool having these like just custom sculpts that Eric makes go out into the world.
Well, I'm glad you didn't go thousands of dollars in debt to make these toys.
No, absolutely not. I learned JD. I listened, brother. I listened to JD Calderon. The man knows what he's talking about. He said, "Don't do it. Just don't make thousands of toys." So we'll make one.
Exactly. I mean, it's probably easier now with the whole 3D printing thing.
Sure. And I would agree. We still have to design all the characters as 3D printing. So, I mean, I wouldn't discount that. I don't even know how hard that is to do, but that's still some work, even though 3D printing would cut out a lot of the production costs.
I mean, do you do that part yourself? Do you do the actual sculpting, or
who, me?
Or you said your friend did that. I'm sorry, you already
correct. No, Eric does that. I'm not a sculptor, so no, he's the sculpting expert for me. I wouldn't try to do that.
Cool. Well, that's cool that you have somebody who can help you with that, at least.
No doubt.
What is Marvin saying? Marvin is saying making comics is crazy. Making action figures is super crazy.
Well,
yeah, I'm sure.
Marvin, he's 100% right. And like I said, I'm more of a custom. Like we'll make 2 more, and if another person buys one, we'll do 3, right? But we'll only do up to 5 for this issue. But yeah, the actual, tool and die, like making mass-produced real action figures is bananas. Like that is a whole nother level of cost and complexity. So I am in full agreement with Marvin on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of money in action figures, but there's a lot of money to be made, but there's also a lot of money to be spent, which unless you have like a Superman or a Spider-Man or somebody who has like a huge following, it's probably not a good idea, right?
I would agree. That's why I stick just to a few customs.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about animated series, and we've talked a lot about action figures, but at heart you are a comic book creator. So I'm curious, what were some of the comic books that really got you excited as a teen?
So probably the comic book that really turned my head as a teenager was Heavy Metal 1989 March issue. That was the first issue of Heavy Metal that I'd ever gotten my hands on. And up until that point, I had, read Marvel and DC fair, which admittedly is cool, right? We're all fans of some of the classics from Marvel and DC. But when I got that copy of Heavy Metal, it really turned my head around because the art was on a different level than a Marvel or DC book. So the main story in that issue was by Juan Jimenez, who passed away recently, and he is a monster of sequential comics. And that was like an R to X rated space adventure, and it was all watercolored. And it kind of blew my mind. It kind of blew my mind to see his skill level in artisanry making a comic, and also the fact that he could put adult material in it, and it flowed. It was hot, right? And I would have been about 15 when I read that. That issue has about 7 stories in it, and it is an outstanding standalone issue of Heavy Metal magazine. But it had everything from science fiction to fantasy to horror in about 120 pages. And so I would say, and again, you read some great Hulk, Spider-Man, X-Men, whatever, but that March 89 Heavy Metal as a teenager, that flipped my head because I had not seen anything like that. And it was intense. Like the last story in the book was about a guy who's a reporter that's investigating a factory that it's implied that it's like cooking people. And then at the end, he's like washing his arms because his girlfriend's disappeared investigating the factory. And he knows the soot is like the people that are being burned at the factory. And you're like, oh my God. And again, it was like Art Deco. And again, it was not content that you would see in a Marvel or DC book. It was definitely more adult, more serious, more scary. And, again, I still remember that specific issue because it was that well done all these years later.
Right. Yeah.
And it had a great cover too. It had a Arroyo cover, I think.
So did you become a big heavy metal fan after that?
Very much so.
And were you a fan of the Corman stuff that from heavy metal?
So I had seen Heavy Metal the movie before I got the comic, and obviously Den was a big part of that movie. And then I discovered heavy metal in the late '80s, and then I started collecting. And your collection is the newer issues, and then you go backwards. And Corbin was a huge part of the magazine's genesis. And I loved Corbin's work that I discovered in there. And then over time, I've got a few Corbin collections that, came because I got into his work in heavy metal. And Corbin's great. I mean, he's got his own unique, crazy style that only he can do. And he is truly an original. And I grew to love him through the discovery of heavy metal, which is one of the really fun parts of reading it, was discovering the Juan Jimenez's, the Casas, the Corbins, right? The Bilals. Like, there's so many, wonderful artists that you discovered as a reader that you got a new issue or an old issue. It's like, who the hell is this? And look, there was some duds in heavy metal too. But, discovering a Rich Corbin was one of the bonuses of just being a fan of the book.
Right. So is there anything like now that's out that's really exciting? Like if you go to the comic book shop now, what are you looking forward to reading?
So my interests over the years have kind of gone more towards indie books and supporting, kind of the weird small stuff on Kickstarter, which isn't necessarily in stores.
I feel like that's kind of everybody.
Yeah, because it's just crazy stuff. So like the last book that really tripped my trigger on Kickstarter was Angel Slayer, which it's one guy writes it, one guy draws it, and he's doing everything just with this super detailed, like heavy heavy metal inking style, where it's demons and angels and horrible people in history fighting, and there's a storyline, and there's goats, and there's wild stuff, and it's just cool. It just reminds me of like a heavy metal album cover come to life, and I love it. So I do love my indie creators, and I do love like the batshit crazy stuff that you can find on Kickstarter. But most of what I read now is manga. And I've been reading manga for 35 years. I'm a huge fan, and the stuff that I've really enjoyed in the last few years is Gantz, which is kind of a weird people being kidnapped at the moment where they die to fight aliens in Tokyo in an alternate dimension that's right next to ours. And it's kind of like Ghostbusters with aliens, and it's really weird. And that's over. I have all 37 volumes of it, and I really enjoy it. I would say that's been a big thing for me, and I still am trying to catch up with Attack on Titan. I really have enjoyed that series. And I've really enjoyed Dorohedoro, which just got put on the Netflix a while ago as an animated series. It's kind of like Black Magic Harry Potter, if that kind of makes sense, where it's like a world of magic next to ours, but everyone is like a necromancer or using magical mushrooms to like fight with fungus. And then there's a lizard that keeps putting people in his mouth to try to figure out who he really is. It's very strange. So that's kind of the direction I've gone the older I've gotten.
So what is it? What is it about? I mean, I hear that at conventions all the time, but I mostly hear it from people like in their early 20s or younger. People say, No, I don't like American-made comic books. It just doesn't have
Oh,
the same juice
I'll,
as
I'll tell you
Japanese.
why. I have an answer for this, and I think it's a pretty good answer. So the biggest problem I see with U.S. comics is this, and I'll give you a recent example. I've seen a couple pinup pieces recently on Facebook and Twitter with Batman in a kind of a really weird variant uniform, where he looks like a gigantic refrigerator-sized person, and then people are debating about whether it's a cool costume for Batman, right? Some people like it, some people don't, and that summarizes where U.S. comics are struggling because to me, the big two publishers, DC and Marvel, all of their ideas seem to be about little variations on characters that are very old. So with Batman, we're arguing about a variant costume. Do you like it? Grant, do you like the new costume? I do. And you're like, I don't. Whatever, right? Um, and like these ticky-tack arguments about, hey, here's a different version of Wonder Woman, or Superman's going to be a little bit different. And to me, it's just the same stuff. There's nothing fresh. But if I go to talk about anime and manga, right, it isn't about, like, let's take Akira, which is like one of the classic defining manga and anime of the genre. We still love Akira. But what they're not doing is saying, hey, here's a new version of Akira where the bike's a little different. Akira's done, right? It is
Right.
creatively, it's done, and we can appreciate it. But the strength of anime and manga is that the most exciting things in manga and anime are all new. Right now, I'm into Solo Leveling. I'm into Chainsaw Man. I'm into Attack on Titan, which granted is a little bit old in anime years. Kids are into My Hero Academia. They're into Demon Slayer. They're all fairly new. And in 5 years, there's going to be new big titles that we're all going to get excited about, right?
Yeah.
The problem with DC and Marvel is in 5 years, you know what they're going to be talking about? A new costume for Batman. And,
Right.
is there a new version of Wonder Woman, Spider-Man, Superman, whatever, where it's like it's a new character wearing the same outfit and, blah, blah, blah. And they're not, it's almost like an inbred population. It needs new DNA. So I said to a friend of mine that we had this similar conversation. I said, think about this. Who are the last characters that became big from Marvel and DC? And I said, if I'm not mistaken, the newest popular characters from Marvel and DC are Deadpool and Harley Quinn, and they're from the 90s. I said, I don't feel that there is a relevant big name character from either of them that's even from this century. I mean, there's new characters, but no one that's really become a big deal. But you can rattle off a ton of anime that has become big culturally in the last 10 years, easily.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
and that's the problem, is that US comics are just kind of just stuck around the same few characters. They can't do anything new. And that's why I've always enjoyed manga and anime, because whether it was Battle Angel Alita, Chainsaw Man, Gantz, Black Lagoon, there's always a new title, and that's the strength. And that's why it's doing well, because it's just fresh. It's fresh ideas, it's new stuff.
yeah. I mean, I agree with you on some level. I mean, Marvin and I were talking about the new Batman the animated series, and it's like, yeah, it's good, but it's like in the first issue, or in the first episode, it's like Harvey Dent shows up, and it's like, gee, I wonder what's going to happen to him.
Mm-hmm. You've seen it.
Yeah, maybe. Gee, I wonder what's going to happen to Harvey Dent's face. Please protect his face. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, but yeah.
And here's the thing: you could go watch Chainsaw Man, which I love. By the way, Chainsaw Man is freaking awesome. If you haven't read it or watched it, it's great. And I have watched Chainsaw Man. I have not read it yet. And the first season of Chainsaw Man was freaking awesome, and I had no idea what was going to happen. Like, it was so much fun because, like, to your point, we know what's going to happen to Harvey Dent. We know. Whereas like Chainsaw Man, I'm just watching it saying, I don't know what the hell's going on. Like, so Chainsaw Man is kind of like if Hellraiser and Ghostbusters got together, if that makes sense. It's crazy. And as a fan, I just was loving it so much because I had no clue what the hell was going to happen. Right. Which is fun.
Yeah, and I mean, and then the other problem is, I mean, like as old men, we can all sit around and complain about like,
Yeah.
oh, why is Daredevil now? I don't know, Reed Richards' cousin or whatever. I don't know, whatever weird plot they're doing now. But I mean, like, you really have to do something weird in order to come up with something that hasn't been done, and
Right.
with when you're talking about 50 or 60 years of continuity, which is why like sometimes people ask me like, is your goal to work for Marvel or DC? And I'm like, no, I would have no idea where to start writing those characters.
Well, so I look at pop culture like a stick of gum, and no pop culture stays fresh forever, right? You put a fresh stick of gum in your mouth, it's great, it's got flavor, whatever. You chew it for a while, you're like, all right, I'm done, it's going to the trash. And all pop culture slows down and loses momentum. All pop culture wears out. I don't care how good it is, it all starts to lose momentum. And to your point, if you look at any of these characters, Batman, Spider-Man, Wolverine, whatever, one of the things that I realized as a comic book reader is that it seems to me the most interesting stories to readers now with those characters are Old Man Logan, Kingdom Come, right? Things that actually start to wrap up the story, because in anyone's life, you're born, you have a life, you die. The problem with all these characters is because they're never allowed to end. There's no dramatic impact. If Spider-Man dies tomorrow, he'll just come back because he can't end. So everything loses all dramatic tension. And I think the readers are hungry for an end to the stories, but the publishers won't end it. So you're stuck with these things that are just kind of this endless mishmash, like you're saying, where it's like they have to keep. There was a scandal a couple years ago, and it became political, but I laughed about it, where it was like Thor became a woman or something of that nature. And I was like, oh my God, there was all this like outrage. And somebody said, Jason, what do you think about that? Does that upset you? And I said, I said, no, it doesn't. And I was like, and here's the other thing. If you had a comic that was being written for 50 years, eventually, I mean, to your point, hell, if I'm one of the writers, you may say, well, could we have Thor do this or Thor do that? And everyone's like, we already did it. We already did it. So you're like, well, okay. He turns into a woman because I'm out of ideas, dude. Like you said, it's like his Daredevil's Reed Richards' cousin. And it's like this thing where Robert Downey Jr. is going to be Doctor Doom. And it's like, oh, they'll make it work. And it's like, it's just after a while, none of it makes any sense. And I think if you look at, anime and manga, right? Attack on Titan is ending. It ended. Like My Hero Academia is ending. They're all ending. And like it's kind of sad because we've enjoyed these things for years, but what's exciting as a fan of that entertainment is that they're going to make new stuff. We're going to get into the next thing. And like so Solo Leveling is a new show that I got one of my coworkers hey Alex, thanks for getting me into Solo Leveling. He's like, you got to check it out. And I didn't know anything about it. I love Solo Leveling. It's really cool, and I can't wait for the second season to come out next year. And it's not about an endless regurgitation of a million variations of Batman and Superman and Spider-Man, but it's about give me new stories. Get me excited as a reader. I'm in my 40s. And here's the thing, I love X-Men. I love Spider-Man. I love all those classic heroes. I have all the, Batman Year One, and they're fun to reread. I enjoy all that stuff. But to your point, how many times can Grant Lankard, who's probably read a mountain of comic books in his lifetime, how often can you see the Batman? Well, here's Joker, here's Two-Face. I mean, after a while, it's you trying to chew that same stick of gum. You'd have more fun. I think you'd have more fun if you watch Chainsaw Man, because you enjoy this stuff. You're a smart guy. Chainsaw Man would be fun because you wouldn't know what's going to happen. It's a weird freaking show. Weird stuff happens that you're learning it with the characters, and it's fresh. You'd probably really enjoy it, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's why those things have a lot of strength. And I've enjoyed them since I was a kid. And I know there's a lot of stuff. Oh, manga's out doing comic books. Why? And I think that's why, because they've keep pushing new ideas versus like regurgitating. Do you like Batman's new uniform? And it's like, I mean, like, how much can we see? You know, I mean, he's had a million uniforms. Here's another one. You know, Thor's a woman. Okay. I mean, like, we've read a zillion Thors. I mean, like, you start to run out of stories. Like, the story you actually like to read is where it ends. This is it.
Right.
You know, and they won't do that.
All right. Well, I feel like I have more
talk.
No, I feel like I have more questions for you, but we're coming up on an hour, and to be honest with you, I have to go to the bathroom so bad.
Yeah.
So I think we're gonna end it. I think you are gonna have to be on the show again because I have more questions for you. But
I'd love to come back on, Grant. Just send me a note when you'd like me to come back on. I'm happy to come on. You're a super host. You're a good guy. You're a comic book guy. I love it, and I'd be happy to come on and answer as many questions. And you could pick my brain about pop culture. You got anything you want to say, buddy? Nah. All right.
I mean, he was very well behaved back there the whole time. I have to hand it to him for that.
He's living the world of Resident Evil right now, man. He's blasting something with 1,000 eyes in a swamp. It's scary to watch.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, like, I thought he was just sitting there listening to this conversation. Okay.
Are you into this conversation, or do you like Resident Evil better?
It's just like a background music.
Yeah, we're just background noise to him, Grant. You see?
I get it. All right. Well, Jason, congratulations on the Kickstarter doing so great. I hope it does even better.
Thank you.
And like I said, I'll have you back on the show some other time. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you having me on, and I hope all the listeners check out my Kickstarter campaign, Lords of the Cosmos issue 5. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Yeah, and thank you to all the listeners. Good night. All right. Thank you.